Hello, everyone. Welcome to the talk on You Don't Train for a Marathon in a Lab, presented by myself and largely contributed by all the generative AI available out there, including Gemini, Claude, OpenAI, and the rest of the SLMs out there. Uh, the one thing you could take away from this talk could be that all the challenges in evaluating the generative AI application and potential analogies with the real world. Just briefly about myself, I am Sawan. The best way to say my name is number seven. We replace E's with A's. I'm a builder, engineer, father, friend, and super curious all the time and learning new technologies and building things. I currently work as VP of Engineering at BCG, and I also teach as adjunct faculty uh, at University of Connecticut for applied generative AI. That being said, this talk is my personal perspective, a limited or no experience to running a marathon. Okay. You can see me on the right hand side driving the bird, but I haven't had as much practice to be able to actually run a marathon. But yes, I have done a lot of treadmill work. Uh, I have a chip to cloud experience. That means I have worked on a very small scale chip designing, embedded systems, consumer software. I have led multidisciplinary teams. I have background in entrepreneurship as well as developing new ventures. But for the last 2.5 years, I have been largely focused on building generative AI applications. Now, moving on um, to what we see here as a part of generative AI is, or as a part of LLMs, and you will find me using these two words interchangeably, like LLMs and generative AI. What we find here is that LLMs are super powerful. Okay, and their ability to understand and generate human-like text, as well as key insights. Um, in being able to develop software applications has been applicable or is applicable to a lot of enterprise applications, right? At the same time, all of what we see from a performance perspective, we have also seen that they have generated factually incorrect information. Okay? Something that sounds plausible but still incorrect. Okay, and this inherent duality, okay, that the LLMs bring to the table, or I call it as a like Hulk phenomena. Okay, it's like I was trying to compare um, LLMs to a superhero, and I was thinking, hey, which superhero could possibly be something like an LLM? Okay, just like Hulk's power often overrides like Bruce Banner's judgment. Like he gets angry and he continues to smash things around and fundamentally it generates a flawed output at times. Okay, that is very similar to how LLMs behave at times. Not the same always, but but I find it pretty similar. um, LLMs always have happened to perform very well um, in the benchmarks. Okay, and we will learn a little bit more about what's happening there. Right. As you can see, we often have started building and deploying these LLMs through the lens of benchmarks. Okay, the standard benchmarks that are created not only by the organizations who are creating the LLMs, but also by external organizations to be able to test these LLMs. The challenges with these benchmarks is that they have reached a point where a lot of the LLMs are performing very well, like 90% plus. Okay, we call it as saturation. This benchmark saturation doesn't just mean that tests are easy, it also means that high scores might be achieved through some strategies. Okay, and potentially the LLMs lack generalization and mask some fundamental deficits in understanding and reasoning. Okay. Also, we have seen these benchmarks are susceptible to contamination. Okay, that means they have been in as a part of their data have been potentially trained on some of the data solutions from the benchmarks. And also, they have been tested on isolated tasks, like one specific task for one benchmark that does not emulate the real world. The way community has responded to this has been raising the bar on the benchmarks, right? So instead of having a benchmark where everyone would perform 90%, they have said that, hey, why not we create a very difficult benchmark where you would perform, where we might not have any LLMs perform at that level. Now, this continuous evolution of the benchmark completely makes sense, and that's a great response from the community. But at the same time, these benchmarks fail to emulate the real world, right? Uh, and also, they now we have some benchmarks which are contamination aware. Okay, they are aware of the fact that some of the results might be already used as a part of the training data, and then some of the benchmarks are now trying to also employ in workflow testing. That means you are not isolated testing that particular LLM in the synthetic world, but also trying to see how it would perform in the real world. Okay. One of the recent interview of Mark, CEO at Meta, had mentioned that they do not think benchmarks are the way Llama models will be iterated and improved. Okay. And he publicly was called out that, hey, why did Llama models didn't perform well on these benchmarks? And he was like, that potentially doesn't matter to them as much. Okay. What matters to them is that what is the real user feedback? Okay. How do the users want the models to be improved for their benefit? Now, this is a powerful notion coming from someone who has always advocated for open source models, and one could take it as like, hey, they don't perform very well on benchmarks, so that's why they found a they found a way out of that. But I strongly believe that actually testing with real users, it would be a lot better than benchmarks. That being said, benchmarks good is benchmarks are important and they have a place, but they should be they should potentially only constitute towards a very small percentage towards your decision making of which LLMs to choose for the application versus the whole LLM. There are a couple of learnings from the field that I've had as I was working through all these applications. One was one learning, as you can say, is the integration bottleneck. Okay, all the applications that we are generating for the LLM models, as you start deploying them in the real world, you find that the LLMs, I mean, the core part of the application, which is interfacing with the model, might be performing great, okay. But as it integrates with the downstream tasks, they cannot handle, the downstream task may not be able to handle the output volume coming from there. I mean, one of the examples that comes to mind is the scheduling scenario. Let's say you have an automated line for scheduling. Now, people call that line, people are being responded by an AI trying to schedule an appointment. All of them are able to respond, promptly to the questions that the AI might have. AI is able to respond promptly back. But then after the appointment, AI confirms that, hey, they would want an appointment at this time. Okay, the downstream task of actually ensuring that that appointment lands in the calendar of that particular individual for which you are booking an appointment for. Let's say it's a situation of a doctor's office. Okay, that workflow of landing that appointment on doctor's calendar could still be a manual workflow. Okay, and limited by how you can organize the calendar for the doctor. Okay, so you have to always take into considerations everything in the workflow. Okay, right from the intake of of the data to where the task is actually completed. The second type of failure, I like to call it as polite failure. Okay, LLMs are super polite, and and this may be because we see that they have a very helpful tone all the time. Okay, but they may be spitting out gibberish slash irrelevant content. Okay, and this may be because we never hear them say, I don't know, or I can't do that. Okay. um, Versus we always have them actually give us some kind of a output that may seem plausible. Okay. And why does this happen? This is because maybe the training data that is used is always maintaining this generic responses. Maybe the optimization goal or the RLHF training for that particular model had always avoided negative responses. And lastly, it doesn't really have a true understanding of the situation and might not realize that it is generating uh, incorrect information. Okay. And I call this as a polite failure, right? Something that we all must be aware of while we are evaluating our applications, which are built on top of the LLMs. And all of these reasons bring together of why I believe that the lab environment fails for the enterprise workflows, right? Um, Most of the enterprise challenges are around the fact that they have messy, unpredictable data, right? You build some kind of an LLM pipeline on top of emails. You expect the emails to come in a specific way. What if someone has actually written an email which is full of spell mistakes and which is in multiple languages, and you have not never accounted for the fact that this is how you would potentially get an email. And and that's one of the reasons with a lot of messy unpredictable data in an enterprise environments. Okay. These enterprise environments are 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 always integrated with a lot of other systems. Okay, in a typical hospital systems you might have 300 to 500 applications. Okay, so you have a lot of different systems that needs to work together to be able to deliver the output. Okay, and that means LLMs don't operate in an isolation, but they are part of the blockchain. Okay, and that's why the lab environment, you can't just take the trust the isolated set of testing to be able to put that application in the real environment. Okay, and finally, this the real world is a higher stakes environment versus the lab environment. Okay, so you go beyond having to be able to test for few scenarios, but everything around that, right? How this might impact customer trust, how this might impact compliance, how this might impact operations. Just imagine from a marathon runner perspective, it's just not about running and getting good stats, but also it's it's about the mental fitness. Okay, you are 20 miles in your, or you're 80% in your run, and you need to be able to stretch towards the last couple of miles, and you are stressed out and you want to be able to get through those last couple of miles, and that requires a lot of mental toughness. Okay, and this goes back to the point that your evaluation needs to see the weather and the terrain of the actual deployment. Okay, to sum it up, all of this put together gives you potentially gives you a reliable um, a very reliable set of evaluation that you would want to run for your enterprise workflows. Okay. um, and this one video, I actually used all the content so far to be able to generate a video using Google VO2 to be able to say that, hey, how it might look if the marathon runner is preparing for a challenge in a city race by training exclusively on a treadmill in a climate control environment. Okay, and as you can see, if you continue to be able to do this, what might just happen is that in the runner might have a very good experience on a treadmill, but it fails to be able to prepare the runner for the actual realities of the steep hills, the changing weather, the uneven pavement, um, and everything else that goes alongside with it. So he might get good metrics in the lab to be able to say that you can actually do it in the real world, but may fail to be able to take on the stress of the real course. So first step for you, or for me, many times when I started developing any kind of a generative AI application, is to be identifying and creating the evaluation criteria. That's a must do. Okay. And Ultimately, the success of the deployment of any kind of an application has to potentially result in meeting some business objectives like operational efficiency, some kind of a revenue growth, or improving productivity or customer satisfaction. And all of these business metrics that you might be aiming for has to be incorporated back into the evaluation criteria for the system that you are building. And this altogether allows you to be able to build your set that is beyond the benchmark. So let's say if you had to be able to making a decision on which LLMs to be you should choose to deploy for your application, and there's a place for benchmarks which might account for some decision making, and then the rest of that is all of these business values and metrics, as well as the performance, scalability, reliability for that particular application in context of your business. Okay, of how you would execute, how you would run that particular business. Many times, and this goes back to, you may not be aware of what business users you would want to be able to talk to identify the evaluation criteria. Okay, let's take an example of the same scheduling appointment. Now, who is the right person, okay, who would be impacted if the number of appointments that you have booked are not equal to the number of appointments that land into the calendar? Would it be the doctor? Would it be someone from marketing? Would it be someone who is at the front desk? So, identifying the right personas or the individuals who are working together to be able to define the evaluation criteria is very important. As you identify and start drafting this evaluation criteria, taking into account all of this, you start building your data set that you will use for the continuous evaluation of your platform. And this is not something that you have not done before. Think of this as very similar to um, what we have potentially done before. Okay, if you have gone through the transformation from waterfall to agile, we as we moved from waterfall to agile, we required new tools and new behaviors, and all of these similar things like tools and behaviors that we had adopted when we went from waterfall to agile. We need similar new tooling, new processes, new behaviors as we go from taking these LLM models that are created in a lab environment, as we try to apply them in the real environment. We need to add all of these tooling and processes and behaviors into the organization. Okay, and some of this tooling might already be existent in your organization through existing platforms. Some of this tooling is something that you might need to adopt. Like for example, you might need to adopt some tooling for experiment tracking, some feedback mechanism, okay, some way to be able to monitor and log all the requests that's coming in. And there are open source tooling options available from Comet, otherwise other organizations, which allows you to be able to deploy this tooling within your environment. And then potentially new processes. Okay. Um, Many a times what we see now is that um, organizations are spinning up new net new departments to be able to just focus on some of these processes, and that could be a good solution. But at the same time, you would also want to leverage what you already have. Okay, think of this as an extension to your ML platforms that you already have in place. Okay, you might have had some way of navigating incident responses for your existing ML platform. You might have defined some way to be able to monitor this ML platform so that if there's a data drift or uh, any any sort of a change in the output, you can go back and take a sample set to be able to see how it has changed and how it has negatively or positively impacted the output scenario, and continue to evaluate this in your continue to evaluate this and make it as a part of your deployment cycle. Okay. Some of the new behaviors that your team might want to adopt is start having collaborations across multiple sets of teams. So applied generative AI slash AI engineering is a cross product of data science, okay, product engineering and operations. Okay, it's all sort of set together to be able to achieve the AI engineering for your organization. And because there are a lot of concepts from data science world that you may want to use as you are deploying this product, as well as a lot of elements from just engineering that you need to do around this LLMs. Then there are a lot of concepts from core product and operations that get impacted because now the human workflow itself changes. Okay, the fact that the previously someone was um, not using a specific process is now starting to be able to someone was using a specific process now starting to be able to remove that part of the process because the LLM has taken over that requires extensive change management. Okay, so that the person can now adopt to this new behavior. Okay, that requires the willingness of that particular person to iterate and work with that particular teams, product teams, and deploy these models in the real world. As you navigate this new processes, new tools, and new behaviors, the important thing for the organization is to get started on building all the evaluation sets that you come across in all of these different activities. For example, you might encounter that the person at the front desk now needs to potentially the person at the front desk now needs to potentially look at additional queue for all the new appointments that have landed using the AI scheduling, right? Now this is a change in behavior. Okay, now this needs to be also accounted in the evaluation set to be able to see how you can ensure that the LLM model does not have more than X number of appointments per day for that person to be able to consume and then make it to the calendar. All of this translates into actually hitting the road. Okay? Start building the real world evaluation sets. Mm. Can be equated to like an endurance training for LLM powered applications, right? And getting them into the actual operating environment. We are always hesitant to be able to get these applications out. You want to be able to have all the controls in place, everything in place. You may not have everything in place at once, but it's important that you start somewhere in a smaller scenario and get used to the loop of iterating. Okay, you'll find this concept equals to how waterfall went to agile, but it's just not about that, right? Here you still need a lot of different entities working together to be able to make this work, make the evaluations, create the evaluation sets for you. And what does real world exposure mean, right? Okay, um, definitely deploying these applications, um, or getting a sample of the real world, workflows. Okay, getting diverse inputs and outputs. Okay, different failure scenarios that you might observe in the real world. Um, Not just measuring the outcome of the LLM model, but measuring the outcome of the integrated workflow. Okay, ensuring that you have incorporated for human feedback through this. Okay, if your workflow depends on the fact that a human would have to review the output, then your evaluation sets also needs to account for that particular fact and need to keep this. It cannot be one static evaluation set. It has to be continuously updated as the business situation changes. Your business or your enterprise workflows are going to change as you deploy these applications, and as they change you would have to come back and adopt a new evaluation set into building your applications. I say gets get started, actually hit the road, train as you would want to race with it, right? Okay, this kind of changes from where you would have seen um, in the lab control environment versus what you see on uh, the road. So I always say to folks who have been working through this is that uh, it's very important that you start investing in building real world evaluation strategies. Okay, because in the sense that you might have a MVP or a POC that is running very well for a specific scenario, that does not guarantee that it will sustain the terrain, the weather, the unpredictability of your system. Okay, so for you to be able to give confidence to your business stakeholders as well as give confidence to yourself that this will work in the real world, start creating that evaluation set that you need for testing it in the real world. With that, I'm open to questions from everyone. Thank you.